For this video, I'm going to be discussing creating a pattern for Doctor Strange's cloak. I don't have my version of the cloak done yet, but this will go through the way I'm going to be currently making it. The issue with the cloak is twofold. First, there's a lot of fabric. Second, the cloak is CGI during half of its screen time. Now, it is good CGI, but there's a definite smoothness to it when it is CGI, which makes it harder to see exactly how it was put together. My first step was to take a look at the screenshots I've gathered in an attempt to break down the cloak design. My second step was to get really annoyed at it. This cloak makes no sense. My third step was to give up and make a model, because when in doubt, make a tiny version first. I found some hideous twill fabric I bought when I must have taken leave of my senses, so I decided to use that to make a mock-up. After I figured out the general idea that I think the designers had when they started making the cloak, I went back to the images and then began the large mock-up. I started with a circle and then removed a slice from the left side. That side will meet up with the mantle edge in the back to form the section that gets pleated. The side with the pleats is noticeably shorter than the side with the shoulder patch. It took me a little bit to realize that the whole cloak is centered around the placement of the shoulder patch. Once the shoulder patch is in place, I realized that there is way too much fabric in the front. The cloak is smooth in the front without any gathering. There are two ways to solve this issue. One is to cut the shoulder hole deeper until the fabric is in place properly in the front and push the excess around the back. Or two, have a hidden seam in the first pleat directly in the middle of the shoulder patch. I played with both options and ended up realizing it was just too much fabric to try to push to the back, so I ended up adding that extra seam in the middle of the pleat. The mantle itself is quite lopsided. The left with the shoulder patch is a straight line down and meets with the patch on the back, while there is a small seam at the top of the shoulder where the cloak comes around to join it in the front. On the right, the mantle is longer. Again, there are two methods that can be used for this. You can have the mantle run the whole length of that side and then place the three pleats to match, or you can make three smaller pleats on the mantle and just match them up to the larger pleats on the cloak. Faking the pleats for the mantle could save a lot of fabric and it could cause it to lay flatter. There's really quite a lot of fabric that needs to be pleated on that side, but it's up to you. The nice thing about the cloak is that the patchwork in many of the different places on the back allows for it to use smaller pieces of fabric, and you don't have to rely on one giant piece. If we go back to my terrible drawing of the shape, we can actually add those sections to see how they might look without all the pleating. This gives you an idea of what type of shapes you would need to cut out. What I also noticed is that there appears to be a seam on the shoulder patch side running in the opposite direction. That's not a great representation, but what I think happens is when you make a fake seam in the pleat on that side, the fabric ends up being much shorter than intended, and so they might have added more fabric to it in those spots. Or it could just be the checkerboard quilting. This project has shown me that I definitely need a higher definition TV. Now for the collar, there appears to be three separate pieces. One is a stiff piece that rests at the base of the neck, helping to give it that shape and to hold it up. And then there are two nearly identical pieces that fit inside each other. One is quilted and one is just plain except for the edge details. I suspect that all three pieces have interfacing to help them hold their shape. Hopefully you guys found this somewhat helpful. Let me know in the comments below if there is something you would like to see in more detail or if you have any questions about your own builds.